My name is Isabella Lambert, and today I will be talking about toxic women. Most women today must create a different version of themselves to be able to get ahead at their jobs, or break through the glass ceiling, as the saying goes. The corporate world is very much still a man's world, and women have to get creative when they're trying to learn how to navigate it. For women to be successful and potentially obtain those coveted C-suite positions, they must act like a man, in a sense. And I'm sure that many of you have mothers and other women in your lives who have been wildly successful in the corporate world and at their business jobs, but how they act at home probably isn't the same way that they act with their colleagues, if I had to guess. And I hate to break it to you, but your mom is probably toxic. No, not in the way that you're probably thinking, with the constant nagging or the picking arguments or treating you like you're her little kid, even though you're very much an adult. I'm talking about a leadership trait, one that can be turned on and off. Being toxic is a form of leadership that many managers, leaders, and other business professionals adopt depending on who they're working with, what type of employee they're dealing with, or what a specific situation requires. Take Serena Williams, for example. She's known for her tenacity and her aggression on the court, and is one of the most controversial women in tennis and on tour, solely based on how she acts when she's on the court. She is undoubtedly one of the greatest athletes of all time, but many tennis fans aren't too fond of her, myself included. But why is that? Why, despite her amazing talent, is she not everyone's favorite player? Why isn't everyone jumping on the bandwagon? I believe it comes down to how she carries herself on the court and how she speaks to the umpires. It's uncharacteristic for a woman, but not for the men on the ATP tour. It is common for the men on tour to yell, curse, and argue with the umpires, yet they rarely receive a violation unless they hit the umpire stand or do something really destructive. But when Serena acted similarly during the US Open final a few years ago, as seen here, she was penalized for calling the umpire a thief when he has probably, I'm assuming, been called far worse than a thief by any man, and no penalties would have been given to them. This behavior on tour is uncharacteristic for women, but Serena wanted to be the best, so she fights for it. She was willing to be assertive and have her best interest in mind because she wanted to win. She wanted the best results possible. Serena was toxic. Serena is still toxic, but I highly doubt that she treats her husband and her daughter, Olympia, the same way that she treats the umpires and the reporters after matches, if you've ever seen one of those videos. Over the years, she has learned how to turn this toxic trait on and off when she's at home with her family. To her family, it probably seems like she becomes a totally different Serena when she is on the court. And that's not wrong. She has that ability, and she has learned how to turn that toxicity on and off. She has learned to leave everything on the court and is able to separate her work and her family life. But what exactly does being toxic mean? Like I said earlier, it's just a leadership trait. Just because someone might act a certain way that seems toxic at work doesn't actually mean it's that person's entire personality. To be toxic, it means that you're trying to get the most out of your workers in a shorter period of time. Being toxic is all about performance. It's about results. A toxic leader will push their employees to their absolute limits until the leader is completely satisfied with the results. This is a very short-term type of leadership. So it's typically going to be used in higher stakes situations or when there is an upcoming deadline that needs to be met. So the leader is going to push you harder than usual. Toxic leadership is also very self-centered and self-sufficient. That's why it can be so effective when used in the right situation. When you think about it, most young professionals today are pretty self-centered. If the current job that they have isn't providing them with the pay or the benefits they want or expect in the short term, they will probably just take a different job and leave their current one. They don't feel as though they must stick to one job their entire lives and work their way up like the older generations would have done. If those young professionals aren't getting what they want in the short term, like I said, they leave. They're toxic. Sometimes, though, women can be viewed as toxic in the workplace, but in more of a personality sense rather than a leadership sense, or at least that's what comes to people's mind. Women who are assertive, who have a strong mindset, are overly confident, or seem to not care that much about what people think about them are often referred to as toxic. But that's not entirely right. Most of those women might actually have some of those traits, but usually, and more commonly, women utilize them to be a more effective leader. They act toxic, but sometimes there can be some overlap of when to turn those traits on and off. So, how do successful women who often have to utilize being toxic at work avoid bringing it home? I now want to share with you 3 very broad tips to help you turn that toxic trait off when you get home. Now, this is not a full or complete list, but these small things can be used as kind of a starting point to help you figure out what will work best for you. So, the first of the tips is take a mental commute. Okay, so I know this sounds kind of weird. What in the world is a mental commute? You might be thinking it sounds something like those super woke people who are so focused on self-care would say. And you're right, it is, in a way. But this is the first step that is so vital in separating your work life from your home life. This mental commute is a way to kind of decompress and, like Serena, leave everything else on your hypothetical court before you get home. Now, this could be something very simple as listening to some of your favorite songs or just flipping through the radio station when you're on the drive home. But it is key to find something simple, like listening to music, something that you enjoy to kind of create that barrier between work and home. And if you wanted to, you can also do this on the way to work to help you set up that barrier once again, but then leave your family drama at home. That way you can solely focus on your work and be as productive as you can be. The second tip that I want to bring to your attention is paying attention to how you speak. Now this is something I've struggled with my entire life. It is definitely a learned skill, just like patience is, in my opinion. Being cognizant and mindful of how you are speaking to your family is so important. Indra Nooyi, formerly one of the longest standing CEOs at PepsiCo, said it best. She said, "Speak carefully at home. You don't want your kids and your husband to think that they're your colleagues or your employees. And she's right. Your family will grow tired quickly if you're constantly speaking to them and talking to them and even treating them like you treat your colleagues. I know I used to hate it when my mother would come home and she would talk to me in her teacher voice because I was her daughter. I didn't need to be bossed around like one of her third graders that she had been talking to all day long. I wanted to be talked to normally and have a regular conversation with her. So, don't speak to your family like you're bossing them around and trying to meet deadlines. They won't appreciate it, and they probably won't sit around very long to talk to you. And lastly, what I'd like to share with you is try to make sure you stay actively engaged when you're at home. Stay off your work email as best you can. Try not to only talk about work or make your family feel as though work is more of a priority than they are. Make sure you try to set aside time specifically for them. Time is a very limited resource, but I'm positive you will be so glad years down the road that you made sure to make time for your family, because jobs, especially in this market, they can change very quickly and are kind of fleeting, but your family will always be a constant in your life. Tennis was a major part of Serena's life. It completely consumed her life, but even though she was constantly traveling, practicing, or playing, she still made her family feel like they were separate from work and that they were a completely different priority in her life. She is a great example of how women can be wildly successful in their field and in their line of work and still be successful in their personal lives as well. Now, this is not a foolproof list for everyone. Each person will have their own goals that they want to achieve in work, or they might want to prioritize family more over working, and that is totally okay. As Indra Nooyi has noted in some of her other talks, which I highly recommend everyone going and watching one, balancing work and family is hard. It's something that takes practice and lots of trial and error. And she personally believes one of the most important aspects of being able to be successful in both is to have a great support system who will keep you grounded and remind you to leave your crown in the garage. Just ask her about her infamous milk story. But I'll leave you with this. As a woman, you can have it all, regardless of what the people who surround you might say. Madeleine Albright, the first woman to ever be a U.S. Secretary of State, once said, "There is plenty of room in the world for mediocre men, but there is no room for mediocre women." So to that I say, be toxic. Do whatever it takes to accomplish whatever it is that you wish to achieve for yourself. Just find what works best for you. Now, you might have to be toxic or act like a man at work or dress differently or cut your hair super short, but you can still be a great mother, wife, and everything else in between, like being one of the greatest athletes of all time. Thank you.